Welcome to Three Devs and a Maybe, the podcast series for beginner web developers and general web enthusiasts. Now, introducing your show hosts, Michael Budd, Fraser Hart, Lewis Keynes, and Ed Mann.
Hi everyone and welcome to another thrilling episode of Three Devs and a Maybe. I am joined by my usual co-host, Ed Mann.
Hello.
Fraser Hart.
Hello.
And we have a very special guest on today in the form of Beau Simensen. Welcome, Beau.
Hello, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you very much for coming on. I should point out at this stage that we have no Lou today, and we might not have Lou for a little while. I can't give a definitive timeline on that, but he is a very busy man, and he's certainly finding it a little bit hard with juggling everything at the moment. So
secretly a 007 agent or 00 agent, pretty much. That's
Lou will be back at some point. So
I thought it was like a Tom Jones convention that was going on for quite a long time or something. But
yeah, I think that's right. But he's on tour. He's
got a gig in Las Vegas, and yeah.
A residency, I think.
That's it. A residency in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Tweet him for information on tickets, but I don't really know too much about it. But I'm sure he'd be happy to help out on that. So, so let's start with you, Ed. Good week, bad week?
It's been a great week, yeah. But before, I'm going to have to direct it on you, sir. You've got a little baby boy now.
Yeah,
so congratulations in order, you know.
Thank you very much.
Wait,
is this the first one we've done since you've had the baby?
This is the first one he's done. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I saw as well, Beau, that you're a dad. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. How many you got? Just one? Or
we just got the one.
Yeah, same as my first. So, how old is yours?
He's 3.5.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Is it
I
easier at his age?
Does it get easier is the question.
It's hand-me-down clothes.
It will eventually get easier, and then it gets harder, and then easier, and then harder.
Yeah.
And then easier, and then harder. About the time you get it figured out, everything changes. So.
Yeah.
It's like, I could do this now. Why do you do this? Throw me a cable.
I have to say, little Toby, he's good as gold, actually. He's very little hassle. He's sleeping perfectly and feeding perfectly, so...
and being sick perfectly over you when we meet you, which is always great.
Oh, that was amazing, yeah.
That was a record.
Yeah, like we went to see Michael. Yeah, was it last weekend that we came to see you? Yeah, it was last weekend. And then it was kind of like passing the baby around. Like everyone's like cuddling the baby and stuff. And then the second Michael gets him back, he throws up all over him. It was amazing.
Yeah, I changed 3 times that day. That was a record.
Yeah, I loved it. You then said, this is my second change this morning. So It was quite great.
Exactly. But just sort of juggling that is, it's been tiring. Obviously, it's like week 3 and juggling work, baby, and
how does programming help with having a baby? Do you give any confidence, like knowing programming, like good with that? Understanding Big O notation? No, we're all screwed then. Lovely. Oh dear.
I guess the real benefit we've got is, I don't know about you guys, but I'm lucky that I can work from home a few days a week, and that definitely helps a real lot. So we're lucky in that respect. We can work from anywhere, right? So yeah, that's been really helpful, I have to say.
And YouTube. Because obviously, if you get stuck, you just YouTube it and Wikipedia articles and get scared.
Exactly, man. Yeah, exactly. But back to you, Ed. Yeah.
It's been great, man. Yeah. Lovely weather now. Our summer now is gone in good old England. The rain has started again, which is always great. We have to talk about the weather naturally as English people.
I was going to say, Beau, your co-host for your podcast, he's an English guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Where's he from?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly the town, but I think it's by Hull.
He sounds Yorkshire-ish.
Yeah,
well,
I think
Ed thought it was maybe Burnley or something.
Barnsley.
I think he's by Hull. Is there Hull? It's on the eastern. Yeah, it's right around there. I think he says that's the biggest city near him. So yeah.
Okay. So how do you guys know each other?
We met each other in the Silex channel on IRC.
Okay.
And We spent a lot of time talking, actually, and the first time we met in person, and the only time we met in person, was at Symfony Live Portland last year. Yeah. He was giving his first presentation, I believe, and it was my first presentation. So we were at the same conference, or both of us had the same first conference, so it was pretty
fantastic. Cool. And whose idea was it for you guys to kind of band together and do a podcast?
I think I take the responsibility for that a little bit. he sort of got me hooked on podcasts. He introduced me to the TechSing podcast, and that was the first one I really listened to. So I listened to that quite a bit, and I enjoyed it a lot, and was kind of enjoyed that format. So I was like, yeah, it sounds like these people are just like normal people, but they sound really cool because they're talking about their daily lives, but they're just normal people. I think I could probably do that. That might be kind of fun. So I kind of started hinting to him about it, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So
awesome.
Yeah. I'm really sorry, you guys, if you can hear the baby crying, but I'm trying to escape cat and baby. But Beau, I just saw. I wasn't stalking you, but I just googled you before the show, and actually, I can see your little boy on. It's like one of the first things that appears actually when you Google your name. So
really,
very cool. Yeah,
great SEO work there. That's like great SEO work.
Yeah, yeah. I'll have to do that. I didn't know that he showed up that prominently.
It's a celebrity. Cool. Yeah. So Fraser, how's your week been? All right.
Yeah, it's been fine, mate. To be honest, obviously we've had the long weekend.
Yes.
So lately I've been working on. I was saying to you guys, I just started working on a project that's going to have me kind of getting my hands dirty with .NET for the first time ever. I was a bit kind of apprehensive about it because I wasn't really that bothered about working in .NET, but it'll be a good thing to have on my CV, and it's going to be an interesting one. And like I say before, anyway, like whenever I'm learning stuff, it's always when I'm enjoying myself the most. So I think that's going to be a really interesting project. But yeah, it's still kind of early days, and I've only been working on the front end, so I'm still very kind of at the early stages of it. But yeah, it should be a good little project, I think.
I'm quite really jealous, man.
We know that obviously we had a podcast with C# versus Java, and C# came out on top.
Boom.
So there you go. You win.
Yeah, fantastic. And apart from that, like obviously with the long weekend, I decided to ride my bike over to France after work on Friday, which was a bit of a slog. I did it, yeah. It took me, including the ferry, because the ferry was like 2 hours, and it took me 13 or 14 hours door to door. Wow. So it was, and then I was thinking of riding back, but it was, the weather was too bad, so I got a lift to the ferry and then got the train back from the ferry on this end. But yeah.
Slacker, firstly.
I know, absolutely.
And secondly, that's insane. I remember you talking about it last week.
So how many miles was that, sorry?
It was about 130, 140.
Insane.
Wow. So it was like 60 down to the channel, and then 60 on the other end. But yeah, so I picked that box anyway, so I won't have to do that one again. Yeah.
So what was this? Sorry. What was this long weekend? What? I don't know what holiday this.
Yeah, it's bank holiday weekend in.
It's.
I was going to say UK, but probably not UK, right? Probably just England.
No, I think it's UK, isn't it? Yeah. No, I think it's It's like a bank holiday, so it's a public holiday, and there's always one at the end of. Like the last weekend in August, and then I think we get them in May and around Christmas time as well. And it's just like you get a Monday off work, and it just means an extra long.
And you just do weird weekend, stuff which is good. Cycle to France.
Right to France.
Yeah. Why not?
So, what were your initial thoughts of C# anyway? You like it or?
To be honest, I've not touched it enough to Java's way better. But this time next week I should have an opinion. But I've literally installed Visual Studio. Is it Visual Studio Express, whatever it is? Yeah, I've installed that heavy piece of software that I'm not too happy about. I've just been working on CSS and the templates and stuff now, so I've not really got too far into it, so I can't really give an educated opinion just yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I mean, I've heard good things about Visual Studio. Everyone seems to rave about it, but interesting. So, Beau, did you want to introduce yourself, I guess, and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? You've got an impressive CV of stuff, so I'll let you go for it if you're happy.
Yeah, sure. I've been programming professionally since 1998. I've been using a wide variety of languages and tools since then. I currently have my own consulting company that I've been working on since, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. I've been mostly independent probably for almost a decade. I had a partner for a little while. This last year I've been kind of ramping up my consulting stuff. So I've been spending a lot of time this year doing that. I'm also the co-founder and chief software architect for Reflex Labs. We have a wearables product called Boogio that is kind of right now starting to get a little more little more press and a little more, excitement out there. So that's kind of cool. I created Sculpin. Have any of you used Sculpin?
I have.
You have? Excellent. Awesome. Nice. Yeah,
I've not, no.
Oh, we've got lag here now.
Nice. Yeah, so I created Sculpin I started working on that maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was right when I first started using Symfony components, actually.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if the language.
And again, oh, the.
I think it's just
No,
Fraser, right?
everyone else is fine. I love it that Fraser's the
Fraser.
closest to me, and he's the one with the most lag. Isn't that great with technology?
Yeah, technology is awesome.
Sorry, Beau, you were saying.
Oh, no, that's fine. So yeah, I created Sculpin. It's very similar to Jekyll. I think we might talk about it a little bit later. I worked with Igor to help create Stack, and I'm actually one of the voting representatives for PHP Fig. Sculpin was accepted as a member project last year, and I think at the end of last year. So I've been a voting member of PHP Fig.
How are you enjoying that experience? Is it?
I would say throughout last year, it was really, really busy. Fig was. And basically, since I got voted in, I don't think there have been any major votes. So
just waiting on it.
I did a lot. So I did a lot of stuff coming in, and then now I didn't get to vote on PSR4, for example. I did a lot of work with basically all of the Fig people that were working on PSR4. So I got to do that, but I didn't get to vote on it. So, I think the vote had already been underway by the time my membership was accepted, or Sculpin's membership was accepted, so I didn't actually get to vote on PSR4. So I was a little bummed about that, but, it's been a good experience. Fig has been kind of all over the place as far as, some people are really for it, some
it goes
people
all
are
over the map,
kind of
doesn't
against
it?
it.
Where, as you say, completely against it or completely for it, and there's no in between. You either, you're bought or sold.
Yeah, so it's been interesting kind of seeing that dynamic, and even inside Fig, sometimes there's there can be really big camps for or against certain things. So it kind of gets a bad rap for that sometimes, but who doesn't?
I mean, you're trying to do a good thing. That's the end. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like the end of the result isn't just for your own gain at all. It's for the actual community's gain.
Yeah.
So, and I think we've lost Fraser officially.
Yeah, man.
I heard the doing it. It's and he's gone.
Sorry, Beau, actually, I should have said before, but how do you find juggling being a dad and working, especially when it's your own company and everything? That must be hard.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I rely on my wife quite a bit.
Yeah.
She's super, super supportive of everything. And so, sometimes it means that I have to work on weekends. Sometimes it means I have to work really late.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it also means, kind of like you were saying, that I have a lot of flexibility so that I can help out if I really need to. If she needs to go do something, I can watch Luke, or I can start work at noon instead of at 8 like I want to, which sometimes that can cause a little friction. But it would it's kind of, you have to work as a team. So I have a lot of support there. So that's
very cool.
The reason it works the best. Do you have similar sort of situation?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess one of the things I find working from home is sometimes people think you're not working and you're just available to do anything. I think most of the time I access a computer hotline for my dad as well, which is fun if he's got email problems or whatever. But yeah, definitely flexibility with Toby. It's really good. It just means that I can, if I have to do the night feed or whatever, that I wake up in the morning and I can have a little bit of a lie-in, and my boss is pretty cool with flexible hours. So it definitely helps 100%.
Well, my first actual question, Beau, is how did you get into programming? I love asking this question. I always think it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
What drew you into this crazy world?
Yeah, so I feel like there's a couple of answers to that. I actually had a TRS-80 way back in the day, I don't know, second or third grade or first grade. I don't even know why my parents bought one because they weren't programmers. They didn't.
They just felt that you made
and I don't. That's probably a question I should ask them someday. Why did you get that? And because they basically got it and it sat up on a shelf in the garage for a really long time. before I, for a really long time when you're like in first or second grade. And finally I was like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's a computer. Do you want to play with it? And so,
Wow.
I hooked it up and connected it to the TV and, played with BASIC and, it was all in, I didn't have any of the disk drives or the tape drives that came with it. So whatever I typed in would just go away whenever I turned off the computer. So, that was kind of what things were like back then. And I had a lot of fun with it, but, I didn't really do a lot with it, I guess. It wasn't until, I think, almost high school that I really started to do a little bit more. I started to have, like, actual programming that I could do, which was basically Corn Shell. If any of you worked with Corn?
Oh, never.
It's basically, I don't really remember what its background was. I think it was a AIX system, AIX. It was basically a bash or Zesh or anything along those lines, but I think it was closer to like a C variant. So I started to do a lot of stuff with that and started to do wrappers around, like finger and talk and all of these different commands that you could do on a Unix system. So most of my programming in the early days were just shell scripts, which were really, really, really way too complicated. And like my first guestbook script was actually, I think it was actually shell, because it would actually talk to some of the command line tools. Like there were some like command line tools to decode HTTP messages, like the URL encoding stuff. So all of my guestbook stuff was basically just these massive, massive shell scripts to read data in from environment variables and spit it back out into files or put them in different places. So that was pretty much what got me into it, was this weird little environment of building stuff with shell scripts.
That's awesome. And then, so what progression did you go straight then to PHP, like with the guestbook type thing? I want to go on the web, or?
Actually, I went from shell scripts to Perl because I was working tech support / webmaster for a little local ISP, and like we had like 120 128 baud modems, and like there were actual physical US robotics modems that this guy had bought, and it was pretty awesome. But anyway, we would get tech support requests for people trying to do web stuff, and the number one request that I remember getting was, my guestbook doesn't work anymore, and it was an old Perl script, guestbook.pl, and that was pretty much what got me into like real programming, like moving off of like shell scripts to actually looking at stuff, was basically debugging that script and finally saying, you know what, I get enough questions about this, I should figure out what it's doing. So
this is a problem, I know. Yeah,
it's a problem. I need to understand why this doesn't work for my users, and so that I don't have to keep digging into this every time. So so I transitioned from shell scripts to Perl, and Perl really took me through like maybe 10 or 15 years. I was a big Perl programmer for a very long time.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then after that was PHP, or?
I think it was mostly PHP. Like the big languages that I worked with, I would say like my core language that was kind of like my rock through different periods. I think it was probably Perl to PHP. I programmed a lot of different languages. I've done a lot of C, C++, Java, Ruby. A whole variety of things, but there's always been like one big one that was kind of my focus. And I went from Perl pretty much straight to PHP at that point.
So what made you stick with PHP and then like the whole Ruby and stuff? Was that just because it was what the project was entailed at that time and then going back, or?
Yeah, it was, I kind of got thrown into a project that was already PHP and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was like a nest of includes, and you didn't know why things were working the way they were. There were people relying on globals and functions that were doing really, really nasty things, passing variables by reference just because they could, not because they needed.
Yeah, they didn't need to. They just like, well, it's a language feature. I might as well take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I spent a lot of time in that, and I would say over the course of maybe 6 months, I really started to get a feel for PHP and trying to see how I could do it differently than what people were what this code base was already doing. And I got more excited about it and started to play with it a little bit more. And next thing I knew, I was starting new projects and I was opting for PHP instead of Perl. And I don't remember explicitly making that decision.
That's when you know you've broken up with Perl and you know you've found this new lovely language named PHP.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, like, I look at Perl now and I can't read it. It's like this weird language. It's not like going to Ruby or something that also is kind of like bizarre if you're not used to it. I knew Perl inside out.
That is, yeah, you had like 14 years of Perl. And
I look at it now.
Your brain has just shunned it off. It's like, no.
It's like this weird alien thing that I'm like, is this Perl 6? Like, did they really change the syntax a lot? Because it looks so different than I remember it. And I just can't, I don't know. I open a Perl script now and I'm like, wow. Wow. It's
I think
crazy.
6 versions of any language are bad, Let's just skip to 7 and we're okay. That seems to be the general consensus here.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, actually, I mean, you just really answered it, but that transition from Perl to PHP, I've never played Perl at all. Is there any, I mean, what are the similarities? What are the differences, I guess?
I guess one of the big similarities, is basically the Perl compatible regular expressions. That came from Perl. And so, like, all of my regex experience is basically Perl. I mean, that's what I did almost all the time in Perl, was playing with those regular expressions. So that feels really familiar. So even now, if I go to, like, Python, for some reason, anytime I pull up Python and I need to do a regex, it takes me an hour to learn to figure out how to do anything. And at the end of the day, when I look at the code, it's like, okay, well, I understand it worked, but I don't know why it didn't work when I first tried.
Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know why, like, other languages' versions of regular expressions are different enough that it's kind of hard, but between Perl and PHP, they seem to be close enough that, I get them.
You can transition between them. And
And there were a lot of Perlisms that I don't even remember what they all are anymore, but a lot of them were really nice. There were a lot of things that it did to make basically processing text really easy, because that was kind of what it was designed for originally, was processing text. Kind of like PHP was originally designed for making web pages. Perl's focus was on recording and processing data in that way. So it does a lot of things really well, but you just have to know how to do them, and it can take a little while to figure them out.
And you forget them easily after 14 years.
Yes.
That's a disclaimer on the language.
Yeah.
So I suppose transitioning from that then, so you do a lot of open source work. Well, it seems like it's great, like the amount of open source work you do. And one of the projects that I really am interested in is Stack PHP. I'm just wondering, what's your involvement? How do you get involved in that? And more particularly on Stack, like what are its goals and what is it trying to solve?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I talked to Dave a lot in the Silex PHP channel, and one of the other people who are in that channel a lot that both he and I talked to back probably more so like a year or so ago was Igor, and you're both familiar with Igor, I imagine, Igor Wiedler. Yeah. And at the time I was playing around with a project called Tent. Have either of you heard of Tent?
I haven't. Ooh,
Tent is. I've kind of had this on again, off again relationship with Tent. It's basically a decentralized messaging system that is sort of like Diaspora, but it has like broader goals or less goals. I'm not sure which. Anyway, it had a lot of promise, and so I was pretty excited about it. And I was doing a lot of things with that project at the time. And the server was written in Ruby. And, I know enough about Ruby and Rails to not know if I'm looking at code, if it's a Rails app or not. So I asked them about that, and I said, hey, so, I mentioned something about, I'm not familiar with Rails. I'm like, well, it's not a Rails app. They're all rack middlewares. So their entire application was basically written in rack middlewares.
Just composed rack middlewares.
Yeah. And, I was really enjoying how it was working. And so I had popped into the Silex PHP channel, and I was like, hey, so what's the closest thing to rack in PHP? And that sort of started a conversation between a couple of us, including Igor, on what basically Symfony's HTTP kernel interface was the rack interface, was kind of what we ended up with. Is, basically you have your input and you have your output, and you're just dealing with HTTP on both sides of it. So it kind of went from there. We talked about it a little bit more. Igor did a lot of the early work to kind of build the builder and sort of like set the architecture in place for all of it. And so, yeah, the goal of it was, I guess, to start doing more framework agnostic work with it, at least within the Symfony framework, which sounds kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anytime I say that, I'm like, yeah, it's this way to do framework agnostic middleware
with this
for
framework.
Symfony. But in reality,
it's been adopted, hasn't it? That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So the HTTP kernel interface has been adopted by Laravel. I know that Drupal 8 is using it. I don't know if it's actually 100% compatible yet. But let's see, I can't remember all of the other projects, but there's a bunch of projects that have been using HTTP kernel interface as its core for input-output of HTTP requests. So by building applications in Stack, and there is no Stack necessarily, it's basically just a convention. By building applications with Stack conventions in mind, you can have the same code running in other frameworks, rather than writing like a Silex service provider or a Symfony bundle or a Laravel module or whatever Laravel stuff is called. Rather than writing code there, you can write this other piece of code that you can just put in front of any of these other applications, and it just works.
I think Laravel released one of the middle cookie signing middleware or something. Yeah, so I think is a very cool way, and also like things like sessions. Like everyone deals with sessions in different ways and stuff, but then being able to wrap it. This is the session we want to use.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that really I really love about Stack, and I love about Rack and WSGI and things like this, is this kind of Unix philosophy of, pipes and piping things together, building up these things, composing these things. And really kind of treating the request and the response as these like value objects that we shouldn't change. Of it, which we can duplicate. I think in one of Igor's blog posts, I think I remember seeing that really these can actually be like duplicated and kind of used in this nice immutable way.
Yeah.
But I suppose the thing is with the whole with using this is that how do you find that adoption will take? Do you think there'll be a good adoption like throughout the whole of the framework, like the framework scene, or do you think that really it needs someone like a PSR standard or Fig to kind of take in and say, we want, this to be the step? Like, do you think HTTP kernel interface will be the one that gets through to everyone, or?
I really don't imagine that Symfony's HTTP kernel interface is going to be adopted by everybody everywhere. I've actually been a pretty strong proponent for breaking HTTP kernel interface into its own thing, because right now in Symfony 2, the HTTP kernel interface is a part of HTTP kernel, which has a whole slew of dependencies. So I think that as long as that's the case, it would be a pretty hard sell to get anybody to really start using HTTP kernel interface if they don't want to. They would like I can't imagine Zen Framework 2 using it, for example, because that would just be too difficult. However, if there was one pack, like my thought was it could be an HTTP Foundation, which just has request and response and a handful of other things. Like HTTP Foundation, if that actually had this input-output interface, I think that would be a lot more portable. I think people might be more willing to use it. But I don't know if that's going to happen. I know that there's talk about doing some things new in Symfony 3, but I haven't been paying close enough attention to that to find out what they're doing. But it sounds like Fabian is actually considering moving HTTP kernel interface somewhere else, or breaking out kernel in such a way that to use HTTP kernel interface, you won't have to have so many dependencies.
That would be very nice. That would make the barrier to entry a lot lower.
Yeah.
I suppose actually backtracking probably quite a bit is, why do we need in PHP world this whole idea of a HTTP kernel interface? Like we've got the SAPI. Surely the server API should be, it's the all wonderful globals and stuff. And I suppose me just saying globals is probably, the issue with it.
Yeah, and Stack's actually received some criticisms, and not necessarily criticisms, but like pushback along the lines of, why do we need this? And there are a lot of ways to do things, and if you're working with an interface like HTTP kernel interface anyway, then something like Stack can be incredibly useful to basically let you compose this functionality on top of your application. But if you don't have something like that, or if you have other ways, you can do things with events, you can do these things other ways. The whole reason that it's useful in this context is that you can write code that can run anywhere that uses that particular interface.
And I suppose that the kind of the gift and curse of PHP was that we don't need, because the SAPI is around, we don't need it to make it run with HTTP. Obviously, that's the problem with it. Then that obviously Rack and WSGI and stuff come around because they need to solve that problem. Whereas we've solved it, but we've solved it probably in the wrong way, or the PHP way, which we all love. But that's probably the thing, isn't it? And
and so I think long term, PSR 7 is the HTTP message interface, which basically standardizes request and response, and
which would be huge.
It would be huge, and I think that would be the first step to making a wider push for this kind of thing, because the next step would basically be creating another interface, PSR whatever, that is, here's your response as the input, and you get a request as your input, and you get a response as the output. And basically, at that point, Stack becomes useless, because Stack would only be a Symfony thing, and we would have a first-class Stack that would be basically a PHP Fig project that anyone could, be pretty what's the word? Neutral. It would be a neutral thing that people could get behind. So, in many ways, I look at Stack as something that's useful now, like in the right here and right now, and it can be useful for anyone within the Symfony ecosystem. But long term, I feel like Stack is more of a reference implementation for PHP Fig, or someone else to come along and say, here is what we're going to do to standardize the input and output of HTTP requests and responses, build it around an interface, and this is the cool stuff you can do with it if we can actually all agree on that.
I think that is the end, isn't it? If we can all agree.
Yeah, if we can all agree on it.
Everyone has their own way of wanting to do things. But then I suppose, I think the thing is also in composition and being able to actually wrap these, middlewares, because that provides you then almost like the decorator pattern where you're able then to do something before and after the request. And really, you are free reign to do whatever you want with that. Like, you really do have just these objects that you as long as you delegate to the app that you actually wrap, you can do whatever you want in there. Like, usually, I've seen some of the ones that you've done, like the authorization. So you can do authorization, you can do logging, you can do stuff like OAuth. I think I saw Igor, which great things that allow you then to not have to deal with those. And another one was like URL mapping, where you're able then to kind of map different these applications which require that they are root almost to be, but then you can wrap them saying actually you're going to be a blog now and something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that you can do, and I think that the more people that are aware of it, the more interesting things that we'll see come from it. There was a fly system Stack middleware. I wasn't exactly sure what it does, but I think it basically exposes. I think I saw that as well. Yep. Yeah, it exposes the file
RESTful system. API to kind of.
Yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of things that people are trying to do right now that really weren't possible before in a way that could be portable like this, where I'm writing this for my Silex application, but you're going to install it in your Symfony application, and someone else is going to install it for their Laravel application, and it takes the code sharing and makes it that much easier. I mean, you still have packages now from Composer, which is awesome, but now you don't have to write it in the glue language of whatever your framework is. You don't have
You're
to
just
write
using the HTTP protocol or the response, request objects that hopefully one day will be standardized that we can then. So another big open source project, which you've actually touched on already, is Sculpin. And again, the problem it's trying to solve obviously is something like similar to Jekyll, but what made you go the PHP route? More your affinity with it, or?
So I actually worked with Jekyll quite a bit, and it uses Liquid as its templating engine, and it did some weird things with it. Like, it wasn't using Liquid's inheritance. It was basically saying, here's your source, or here's your page, render the body, and then go get a completely different template and inject your body as a variable into the whatever the layer or whatever the layout was. So you would lose some of the abilities that Liquid had for actually doing template inheritance and passing variables and passing things in a way that made more sense. And I really couldn't find a way to fix that. And I didn't really want to spend a lot of time on it. And I actually did spend quite a bit of time working in Jekyll. And I sent a couple of pull requests. One waited like 9 months before it got any love at all. And I got so frustrated because the response was, can you add a test? And then closed it. I'm like, okay.
Wow,
so
you.
I added a test within like 5 hours, I would guess. Like I did it really quickly because I'm like, this is merge day for Jekyll. I better hurry. And then I don't remember if it ever got merged or if it was another 6 months. It was long enough that I'm like, you know what? This is not going to work for me. So I'd actually been kind of shopping around for a new framework anyway in PHP land, because I had a couple of my own. Like everyone has, 1 or 2 frameworks behind them.
What you do. It's what you do.
It's what you do. And I'd been kind of shopping around for Symfony and kind of paying attention there. And I had this idea that maybe I could do something with Symfony, but I didn't really know what to do. It was right around the same time that I found out about Composer and started looking at Composer. I think that was right before Symfony switched to using Composer for its distribution, like 2.2 or whatever it was, 2.3 maybe. And I was like, oh, look, this is a command line application written using just a couple of the Symfony components. Maybe I could do that too. And I thought, well, maybe I could rewrite Jekyll in PHP. And that sort of, it started as like a little test hobby project and kind of exploded from there. And now it's relatively big for a one-person
cool,
project.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's like code-wise, it's big. There's a lot of pieces to it, and I think it's on its second big version now. Like I completely rewrote it to be less like Composer and more like a Symfony full stack application. So it's actually built around Symfony's HTTP kernel now, even though it doesn't use any of the web stuff.
That is very cool.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm actually very vocal about getting rid of the HTTP kernel interface from kernel, because kernel is awesome. The quote I like to use is there's a comment somewhere that says that HTTP kernel is the heart of a Symfony application. It is a bundle. It is a collection of bundles or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but that was basically it, is that a Symfony application is a collection of bundles, and that's basically the heart of a Symfony application. So kernel is awesome. Kernel interface is awesome, but the two aren't the same. To me, like they shouldn't be tied together. Like there could be...
There is a disjoint. There is, disconnect between the two that you can... that should be...
So I've actually have a lot of extra dependencies in Sculpin right now because of Symfony's HTTP kernel, but I sort of wrote those off as, okay, well, I really, really want kernel. I really want to be able to use Symfony bundles as a first-class plugin mechanism and a first-class extension mechanism for Sculpin. So I kind of just decided to do that and live with the consequences of extra dependencies.
No, well, I mean, memory is cheap.
Yeah.
I suppose because you distribute this as a par file.
Yep.
And then, what's the size of that par file, like, at the moment? Is it...
I want to say it's like 2 megs.
Oh, that we can live with 2 megs. People can live with 2 megs, if it's global as well, you can live with 2 megs.
Yeah, let's see here. Oh. Yeah, so it's 2 megs. No, 3. Let's see. 2.9 megs.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can't deal with that now. No, I had 2 megs,
not
but
gonna work.
Yeah, not gonna. That extra,
Yeah. Well, so one of my other projects that is kind of interesting that came from Sculpin. So there were 2 reasons I wrote Sculpin. One was because I wanted to do Symfony components, and this seemed like a great way to do it. The other was that I really liked Composer. And
is this an embedded Composer?
Yes, it's embedded Composer. So that was the other big thing that really drove me to do this. I thought, well, I'm going to write an application that can embed Composer in it, and found all sorts of awesomeness, like the fact that you have to resolve dependencies against the dependencies that are already resolved at runtime. So it was a lot of fun to come up with that. So that was the other big thing. And I used to not distribute Composer as a FAR, and I think it was Igor actually that gave me a hard time because he installed a Sculpin project and basically said current status installing the internet. Because I think Sculpin has like 45, 48 dependencies right now. So like if you do a Composer install, or if you do a Composer install on a site that uses Sculpin as a dependency instead of using the actual FAR, you get this huge long running list of everything that Sculpin uses, and it wasn't really good user experience. So that's between that and the fact that, you know what, I really got to put my money where my mouth is and start distributing Sculpin as a FAR, so that people have to realize that, hey, you know what, there's actually embedded Composer here, and I can extend it that way, and I don't have to rely on downloading Composer itself first. So that's kind of where that came from.
No, it's a very, very cool project. Very cool project.
There's at least one other project now using it, like a big project named Builder, BLDR.
Oh, Builder, yeah. Is that the one for the actually building par files to create?
Builder.io. It's a task runner, PHP task runner. So there's Box. Box is a project.
Oh, Box, that's the one. Yes,
yeah.
Creating up the par files.
Yeah, but BLDR.io is the project that uses embedded Composer right now. So I don't know too much about the project. I haven't used it myself, but it looks like it's somewhat similar to Sculpin in that its goals are sort of the same, that they want to be able to distribute a FAR that's basically just an application that can be run, and then extended at runtime in some.
So I think that's a great, I think you've actually hit a very good generic kind of embedded Composer. You know, people do need that, and it is a very good thing to solve. Is that, you know, having these par files are great. You know, being able just to download a par file and use it almost like a Unix facility is a very cool thing to be able to do. But obviously, when you're developing it and when you want to actually, you know, be able to, kind of upgrade it and also, you know, just extend it, you want to be able to use all the comforts we have with Composer and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah.
So Mickey, hello, Mickey.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello. Any questions?
Well, I was just going to ask. I know we touched on it before, but with your own consultancy company and everything, I mean, what made you decide to go into that from having worked at? I know you mentioned you had the couple of jobs before that. Is that right? And then you moved into this. How did that all come about?
I was just really optimistic, and probably wrongly so. I'm still learning a lot about how to do this, and I fell into the trap of basically having a full-time job with a client. So that's why this year I've been focusing on actually trying to build a client list and work with people and find new people to work with. Because basically since 2005, I had one big client that basically kept me going the whole time. And I would get little gigs here and there on top of that, but for the most part, that was basically a full-time job,
right?
Which doesn't really help me as a consultant, which I'm learning. So I'm starting to figure out that I don't want to do that again. Like if I'm going to get a full-time job, I'll get a full-time job.
Yeah. But, I guess that kind of puts you in a risky situation as well, where if you lose that big client, then what have you got to fall back on? I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually happened last August, right when we moved. I've been moving a lot, and we've actually been we lived somewhere until about a week ago, and so I lived there for a year. But right before we moved, I would say 15 days before we moved, I got the call that there wasn't going to be any more work for me, and I'm like, what? So it did put me in a bad position. So I basically since then I've been trying to decide, am I going to make a go at this and make this work, or am I going to get a full-time job and just be an employee? And
I think it's a really tricky trade-off, isn't it? I mean, being a freelancer for me was probably one of my dreams, and perhaps one of the reasons why I pursued this career. But at the same time, you don't have that security if you do the freelance route. Mm-hmm. But then the benefits are that you, to a certain extent, obviously your customer is your boss, but you can do things the way you want to do it. And I guess there's less compromise on quality we've talked about it 100 times before, like working in an agency environment where time is king, and so many times that the code suffers because you're meeting a deadline. Mm-hmm. I guess for you, timelines are still critical, perhaps even more so, but you've got more flexibility to do things the way you want to do it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there are definitely trade-offs there. And that's the other thing that I think I've decided this year is that I'm going to focus more on projects that will let me do that. Yeah. And if it looks like someone is going to be too aggressive on their timeline or aren't really fully appreciating the amount of work that needs to be done, that I shouldn't be a part of that project. Like,
that can be very stressful.
It can be very stressful, and it'll keep me from finding other projects that won't be. And so if I spend all my time constantly chasing after these things that, are just basically sucking time out of my life, then it's not going to get me where I want to be. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find as well, I mean, I try not to do any freelance work now, but I come up with so many ideas of things I want to do just for fun and just the kind of stuff that I got into programming for in the first place. But when you're doing the freelance work, that takes up any free time. And I mean, looking at your CV of stuff that you've done, I don't know how you find the time to balance kind of your work and the stuff that, really interests you, I guess.
Yeah, well, it can be very, very hard. I mean, it's hard for everybody. And for me, Sculpin's really taken off this year. Yeah. And I've hardly been able to work on it. And it kills me because there's people actively using it now. And they're like talking about it. And I'm like, but there's those bugs in it. And there's these things that need to change. And I can't do anything about it. So, there's like the whole feast or famine thing. And right now I'm sort of in a feast phase with the consulting work. And it means I'm putting off a bunch of these other things that I really would like to work on, like do more work with Stack, make the website better, make sure that it's easier for people to find middlewares, make sure people find it easier to understand what it is. Like even the website, like if you go to the Stack website right now, Igor and I and a couple of other people put in a lot of time in making it look right, but are sort of say what it is, but I think that people still go there and they're confused and they don't understand, like, how is this useful? Why is this important? Why do I need this right now? And so, like, there's a lot of stuff like that is missing, and I can't do anything about it. And because I have other things I need to do. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just in this podcast, just listening to you guys talking, I can think of just a list of things I want to be learning. I mean, I still not play with Python or Ruby. I'm jealous of Fraser getting to play with C#. The list is just ends, and Symfony. Obviously, Ed's on my case now about learning about Symfony, and just finding the time to do all those things. And I'm still, by and large, a PHP and Java guy, really. I don't, a bit of JavaScript. And
it's a good job you haven't had a baby, and you enjoy
Tell
that
me
part
about
of
it.
life. That's real life, though. Real life is more
Obviously,
fun than programming.
I love all that, but I guess I always feel that pressure that I need to be learning more, and
that's the developer curse, though. The more you know, you don't know, which is the saying that everyone. I mean, that's in any field, and I think that's the craving to know more. I think is a gift and a curse.
Are any of you going to Symfony Live in London?
I am actually. Yes, the company I work for is actually sponsoring Symfony Live. So I will see. I'll be hoping to see your talk. Nice. You're talking about Stack and everything, which is very cool.
Yep.
I'm looking really forward to that.
So when is this happening?
September 24th and 25th or something like that. Yeah, end of September time.
Yeah,
I think.
September too soon.
September too soon. Well, have you been able to practice the talk on local group? No, you're just gonna.
Well, actually, there's. I am giving it in Milwaukee in 2 weeks, I think. So that will be my big trial run. I've been pitching Stack as a talk for a year now, and so this was the first time that I got selected.
I am looking forward to it. It's
yeah,
going
so
to
I'm
be very cool.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it, and I love Symfony Live conferences. I was a little bummed Symfony Live New York. I've been waiting for the next U.S. Symfony Live because the last one was like last May. So I kept thinking, when is it coming? And finally found out, like, I don't know, like a month ago, that it's going to be in New York at the end of October, or middle of October, and it's the day before my sister's wedding.
No.
So,
oh, that is a dilemma.
Yeah, it's not really a dilemma. It's just a really big downer. So I'm excited my sister's getting married, but I was like,
I'm as disappointed as the excitement in not getting to go. Oh dear.
Yeah, they're already nervous that I'm going to be at. That I'm actually going to London with my family. My wife and my son are going to come with me for Symfony Live, and my sister and my mom and dad are already nervous that we're going to be gone up until the week before the wedding. So,
you could. Yeah, there's no way of even scraping anything in.
Yeah.
I know. I think listening on the podcast that your Dave, I think, is also going to do a talk.
Yep.
Dave's
going to be doing a talk as well. He's doing cool. On fakes
fakes, mocks, and
stubs. Yeah. So yeah, we're both excited that we're gonna be able to see each other again because we haven't seen each other since Portland last year. So
always with the stress of having to do a talk. It seems that's how you do it. You know.
Yep.
So, have you played with like Laravel, or have you strictly been Symfony? And
yeah, I'm not actually. I haven't used Laravel, and I've maybe made 2 total applications of Symfony full stack.
Right.
I'm one of those people who I don't know how many of us there are, but I'm a Symfony person who doesn't use Symfony.
You're a Symfony components guy.
I'm a Symfony components person. And so I do almost everything in Silex. So if I'm going to build a web app, almost everything is going to be in Silex. I actually prefer to do most of my code in isolated from the framework agnostic packages and things like that. So Silex makes it really easy to do that and to basically build the application really easily, and then you can do whatever you want to after that. You can basically take it and turn it into controllers as services and leave them in Silex, or you can then go and do a full stack Symfony application if you want to. But I haven't done anything with Laravel yet, which it's probably well past time for me to at least try. But yeah, so yeah, I do almost everything at Silex right now. So I don't do a whole lot in Symfony full stack. I haven't done anything with Laravel or any of the other frameworks. Looked a little bit at Aura components. Someone finally created a stack wrapper for Aura, I believe, which I thought was something that I could do to sort of jump into Aura.
That would be a very good,
but I didn't end up having the time. But I just saw someone retweet recently an old message saying that someone had done that, so I should check into that a little bit more. But yeah, otherwise I haven't really done anything with any of the other big frameworks. I think the last big one that I used was CodeIgniter.
I was just about to say, were you a CodeIgniter person back in the day?
Yeah, I was a CodeIgniter person for about a year. Like
that's a sore topic for me right now, but yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You're still going to get 3. You will get 3. It will happen.
I just reluctantly agreed to do some freelance work, and I inherited this code base, and it's all in CodeIgniter. And if I ever needed to pick me up about my own code, this was just perfect. It was horrible, really bad. Nice. But that's not really CodeIgniter's fault, to be fair. It was the programmer who did the code. But so I was like, yeah. So Silex uses the Pimple IOC container. That's very cool. I had limited experience with that, but I found it was very easy to use and very nice. So I'll have to have a little play with that myself.
Yeah, it took me a little while to get used to it. But mostly because you lose all code intelligence with it, which is kind of a bummer. But it's also just really easy to use. You just, I don't know. I find it very easy to get behind. So
it looks very lightweight as well, not too intrusive.
Yeah. I know that other people think poorly of it for various reasons, but I think that because it's the whole DI, IOC stuff, I don't always follow exactly why it's important, which things are which. And you can abuse Pimple a lot, and I think that most people do. I abuse it, and when I abuse it, I'm doing it on purpose. Like, I know what I'm doing when I'm abusing Pimple. I think that that's not always true of everybody, and it just it helps propagate bad practices if people start seeing that. So it's just really, Pimple is really cool, really powerful, really lightweight, but I think it's really easy to use. So I think that some people can look at that as like, well, it's not a good container.
Cool. Ed, have you used Silex then?
I have a little bit, only in side projects, because obviously being the Symfony and all that fun stuff. Like, I think it's funny because I kind of had a weird, like, with PHP, in the PHP world, mine was CodeIgniter, Laravel, and then I've almost kind of gone back and then gone into Symfony, where finding out that a lot of obviously the Symfony components are used in Laravel. And actually taking advantage of the Symfony components on their own, as like you were saying, like, you know, being able to use the console component on its own and stuff like that, and browser, it's just amazing. Like, I mean, you know, the ability to be able to use these things and compose them yourself, kind of create your own framework out of these things, agnostic of, you know, a framework and it's such, is quite awesome.
Have either of you looked at OpenCFP? It's Chris Hartjess's application.
Oh, I haven't. No, what is?
It's a bunch of the applications a bunch of the conferences that I've been submitting to recently have started to switch to it finally. I think he wrote it specifically for the True North call for papers. But I know that, what was it? Sunshine PHP last year used it. Lone Star PHP was using it. And I've seen it like probably another 4 or 5 conferences this year are using it. But I started pulling that app apart. Not pulling it apart really, but just like basically opening up random files to see what made it. And yeah, basically he did just that. He took a bunch of components and built his own framework. And and I think it's using some of the Illuminate components. It's definitely using some of the Symfony components, but there's no Silex, there's no full stack app, there's no full stack Symfony anywhere, no framework bundle. There's no I don't think there's any of like the core Laravel stuff. I think it's all components. So
it's all the components out of it. Yeah, you can get some of them have been completely agnostic to the framework.
Yeah. So I mean, it was really cool to see that they just basically and I think he said that Adam Culp helped do the core of it, basically started it. And since then, a bunch of people have been contributing to it, but they just wrote it basically from scratch, which surprised me. I don't really have that in me anymore.
I have full-time job, a baby. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I find other really crazy things to do with my free time, but you know, if I'm going to build a new application from scratch, I'm not going to build it from scratch. You know, I'll just slap a Silex app on it and call it good, and it does a bunch of stuff for me. And I guess we all have different layers of, or different levels of, you know, how much the framework does for you. So I usually think of Silex as pretty low on the stack of, and I'm like, wow, okay, well, there's still people just starting from scratch and building up. So
it's almost like a shopping cart really, though. You just go on GitHub now and you can just shopping cart, chuck that in, I want that, and then build the framework, you know?
Yep.
Well, guys, I think we have just come up to the hour mark, and we don't want to keep Beau for hours. I'm sure you've got stuff to do. And
I've one more question. I'm really sorry.
Sure.
Just because fellow podcaster, I would love to know how have you been able to juggle podcasting? What's your experience been with podcasting? We I don't know if you were like us. We were podcasting newbies when we first started off. October of last year. Wow, it's time's flown now.
Yeah.
Nice. Just wondering, like, you know, how, you know, what's your prep, you know, how you do podcasts, like what's your, you know, setup like, etc. And
so we're up to episode 6 now, and so we're very, very new still. So it's been a lot of fun. Right now we're doing we're each recording our own channel.
That's why you sound so good. That's why you sound so good.
Yeah. Yeah, and Dave does all of the audio processing. So I have nothing to do with why we sound so good, except for me clicking record on my side right now. So you know, we've done a lot of experimentation, and a couple of the episodes have sounded kind of weird. Like depending on the processing, sometimes we'll just sort of trail off, and sometimes we do that naturally. You know, at the end of a sentence or whatever, you start to get a little quieter. But we know, or I know that that's like a compressor setting or something like that. That it's being a little too aggressive on certain things. So we've been struggling through those sorts of little oddities, but Dave's been doing a really good job of that. So,
yeah, definitely. I love the fact you've got a episode 0 as well. You know, it's a programmer behind it with that. Yeah,
yeah. We were on the fence as to whether or not we should publish that one, but I thought that would be pretty awesome. Just
it's very awesome.
So that's the interesting thing that I've found about it is that I found it really. I've found talking to him to be really comfortable. What people probably don't know is that other than talking to him at Portland last year, I had never talked to him voice before episode 0. So if you listen to episode 0, we have this rapport that I think is just great. And I didn't know what it was going to be like when I first talked to him, because I was actually in Seattle at the time, and we just had this little 5-minute recording, and I thought it went really well, and it's basically been like that ever since. But yeah, we hadn't talked voice other than meeting in Portland like over a year before we started podcasting. So it's been a lot of fun. We had an idea for what we wanted to do with the format. We kind of wanted to be more like discussion-based, life-based things. Not a bunch, but some of the other podcasts that we'd sort of like looked at or that I had started to find were more topic-based, and or almost like teaching-based, if you will. And I didn't really want to do that necessarily. Like, someone was in an IRC channel today and said, I should start a podcast, but I don't know enough about this topic. Like, I think a podcast about this topic would be great, but I don't know enough about it. And I sort of feel that way about myself a little bit, but I also didn't feel like there's any topic that is strong enough to stand up to that. Or even to find a topic every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. So we sort of have a general idea, like we're going to talk about whatever this episode, but that's usually like just like at the end of the episode, if we still have time, we'll talk about that. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a lot of fun. I have a lot of podcasts to catch up on. Like basically, I think I mentioned that he first told me about texting in like December or January, and I hadn't really listened to podcasts before that. So since then, I found all of these other, PHP podcasts and things like that. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I keep up with them? And before I was driving to Madison, it was like a 40-minute drive each direction. So I was actually able to keep caught up with a bunch of them. And now I've moved to Madison and have this awesome basement office that has walls of whiteboards
that you can do.
Yeah. So
cool.
I don't know when I'm going to listen to podcasts now, so I have to figure that out. Might have to
go for a walk. I think just go for a walk. Make yourself walk. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Dave does. Actually, he says that he listens to podcasts when he goes for a walk with the dog. So I might have to start doing that.
Great idea. Well, Beau, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you giving up your free time to come on. And for anyone who's listening and who wants to know more about what Beau does, your website is dflydev.com. Is that right?
Yep.
Dragonfly Development.
Yep.
And the podcast is thatpodcast.io.
Yep.
Yep. And Beau's going to be talking at Symfony Live. So get your tickets for that, and you'll also be able to meet our very own Ed Mann.
Hello. I'm sure I'll wave.
Might be a reason to avoid it, but yeah.
You don't want to meet me.
If you want to meet him, he's a thoroughly nice guy, really.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on.
It's been awesome. It's been really great.
Yeah. Was there I should ask, Beau, is there anything you wanted to promote? Not that we have millions of listeners, but anyone who do, anything that you wanted to promote, or have I covered everything there for you?
No, I think you covered everything. Beau.io is my personal website. So, yeah, dflydev.com is for Dragonfly Development, my consulting company. And Beau.io is my personal website. It has most of my talks and everything on it, and other contact information. So
that's really cool. And we'll put everything in the show notes as well. So
absolutely.
Cool. Anything you need to mention before we?
No, I'll just say thank you for coming on. It's been awesome. Really big fan of your work, and I love the podcast. And I look forward to seeing you in next month. Wow,
it's
time
like
is
I said,
fine.
it's September.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I look forward to the talk.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back next week. Cheers.
Bye.
You've been listening to 3 Devs and a Maybe. You can contact us at contact@3devsandamaybe.com or follow us on Twitter at 3 Devs and a Maybe.